budget.
Yeah.
And those are valid questions.
You guys are
Take
for session.
charge.
You guys ready?
Yep.
No.
Oh, I was born ready.
All right.
I'm just not quite sure for what.
You're ready for our finance hearing, so I'd like to turn this meeting over to Andy Unedic.
No, me.
Okay, Monica, could you please start?
Yes,
She's gonna do her Andy Unedic impression.
So,
Oh, there it is.
Oh, I couldn't miss this.
We I overlooked you.
Hey, couldn't see me, could you? Who's coming?
on August 19th, we took the goals for the 2020 budget to the Finance Committee. So this is the presentation I used for the Finance Committee, but I also added some feedback that came back from the committee meeting. So just so you know, the budget process, the city manager is required to prepare the tax budget, the annual budget, and the appropriation ordinance, submit them to council for approval, and then administer those appropriations. The budget process starts with the tax budget and ends with the approval of the budget. So in June, we did the tax budget public hearing, legislation. In July, all of the enterprise funds and along with Andy prepare revenue estimates for 2020. Then they come to me and Andy and I decide on the final revenues for 2020. And then the department heads put together their expenditure budget, which were handed to finance on August 16th. Starting next week, we do budget hearings with each department. So we go line item by line item with each department, talk about justification of costs, if they're asking for increases, what the justification behind that is. All of the ins and outs of the budget happen during those hearings. Once that's complete, a draft budget comes back to the city manager and we review the balanced budget, or we review the budget and try to balance it. Even after those hearings, usually there's cuts that are needed. A final draft is completed by the end of September. The Finance Committee asked for this extra step to be added, so on August 8th, we'll present and justify the capital budget to council. And then October 18th, a draft budget is given to Finance Committee. Then the draft budget is given to City Council. Then starting in November, we do special session and then the 3 reads for the budget. So it's a pretty intensive 5 to 6 month process. Based on council's goals, these are the items you'll see in the budget. So there'll be a city council retreat with an outside firm in January 2020. We'll also finalize the onboarding process, update the council orientation packet. We'll update policies and I'll propose an added communication policy. And then internally, we'll continue our continuous education and improvement process, which includes education for department heads. And the feedback I've been getting from department heads is that some of their frontline mid-level managers also need training, so we'll add some training for first-time supervisors and frontline managers. Under goal 2, which is community engagement, we'd like to strengthen the ambassador program, tying some training opportunities to each ambassador segment. We also want to do some policies and guidelines to better utilize the ambassador program. Per recommendations from the Army, we are looking to diversify our music, food, and cultural events throughout the community. We're also working with Painesville local schools to do a mentorship program where we tie student leaders with city government to help grow the leaders of tomorrow. Feedback that I got from Finance Committee were under community engagement. We're continuing funding for personnel, equipment, and capital projects for fire and police. The feedback I had on that was that if the police levy does not pass, most of this is not going to be possible. And I'll get to that in a second. Activities for middle school age children and seniors. So again, without partnerships and collaboration, we certainly can't improve that much in this area. And I've already started some conversations with Lake County Council on Aging and for the senior citizens, obviously, and then Painesville City Schools for activities with middle school age children. We definitely need more revenue, or we have to eliminate entire services to be able to do these on our own. So at this point, without the police levy or without collaboration, these areas you won't be seeing these in the budget. Goal 3 for infrastructure. We continue with our 5-year rolling road plan. We do plan to do Skinner in 2020, Button Avenue, Watson Street, Smith, Roosevelt, microsurfacing of Liberty Greens, and then the savings for the Bank Street revitalization, which isn't on there. So the changes that have happened from the original plan to today is that we moved Riverside Drive from 2020 to 2019. We moved Cedar Brook from 2020 to 2019. We moved Button from 2019 to 2020. And we've added Casement because the county is doing their portion, so it's economies of scale, and we hop on board to do that, which moves Sanford from 2020 to 2021 and puts Roosevelt in place. And the Sanford piece was just Richmond to Skinner, but it does need some water line and other improvements.
It was Richmond to Skinner, but it was also on the other side of the freeway bridge. Was that not?
That's in 2022 or 2023, and that hasn't been changed. Sidewalk program, to be completely honest, I believe engineering fell a little bit behind on sidewalk this year because of all the other projects that came up. So the gentleman we hired to do the sidewalk program ended up doing a lot of inspections on projects, which saved us money, but pushed the sidewalk program back a little bit. So we are going to get tree letters out before the end of the year, the warning letters for the areas where the trees are going to get cut down. The engineering and communications have requested that you allow us to send those letters as we're going to get into those neighborhoods, because if we send them all out today, there are segments that won't get a tree cut down for 5 years. It's kind of a pointless letter to send it out all in one lump. So we're hoping that you guys would be comfortable with us sending them out a year ahead of when we plan to get in those neighborhoods. That way the communication is more timely. And then under infrastructure, there's also the perception issue with litter and private and public property cleanup. So we did do a litter committee in 2019. We are moving forward with the education process through stencils, coloring contests, and giveaways. We're also moving forward with the community cleanup in October. The feedback that
Can I ask a quick question?
yeah,
Well, just on the litter cleanup, it just seems like October is the end of the season, but what about the beginning of spring? Like, that seems to me like a good time to...
So what we're struggling with right now, and we're still trying to iron out, is how to do a community cleanup without spending money. Which is kind of difficult. If we do well in October, we can learn from it. We'd like to do a spring and a fall, but we have to try it, learn from what we've done before we can implement.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. So the feedback I got from the finance committee was road improvements and infrastructure, which I think we already touched on. Street parking issues, which is under new business on tonight's agenda, so we'll talk about that. And then Store Street Complex and the strategic plan tied to that. So I did pull the strategic plan on Store Street. The challenges that came out of that plan were the size of the lot, being able to cover all vehicles, and the salt shed that's needed to be replaced and where it would be located, were the 3 main challenges. The costs were pretty high. So I asked our infrastructure director, Randy, to go back with the departments, and they sat down, scaled back what their wants and desires are to talk about what the needs actually are. And we're back to just what the needs are. And then strategizing, we have to get some costs for asbestos removal on 2 of the buildings prior to demolishing them. But there are 2 buildings that do need to be demolished before we can move forward with any new builds. So it's just getting which ones come down at what time prior to new buildings going up, and then the cost tied to all of that. So I don't have a plan today, but they are working on it. And then the 4th goal was future growth. So the main part of this goal, since this has been passed, is to review the comprehensive plan. We kept putting it off because of the cost, but it is in the 2020 budget as of today. This is where we'll really get a look at what land is developable, what kind of housing stock we have, what kind of housing stock should we have, what can we do with commercial and industrial opportunities. It also talks about things like streetscapes and roadways, and the comprehensive plan is the plan that everything else is based on. So it's a big deal to do an update. It'll have a lot of public participation. It'll take a lot of time, but our last update was just a refresh. It wasn't an actual update, so it's definitely due for a new plan. So the feedback from Finance Committee was about economic development. So the questions of helping current businesses grow and attracting new ones, and then the income tax revenue. So for those of you who are on the Economic Development Committee, you have been a big part of the Economic Development Plan, which talks a lot about the first point, which is helping current businesses grow and attracting new ones. We really focus on 4 main areas: retail development, large office business development, manufacturing, and then development of land. Retail development, we lean on the Main Street program a lot for the retail development and the DPO for that area. We also have been working with Heritage Ohio to do training for our small businesses and looking for ways to not only secure our historic anchor facilities in the downtown, but growing and using succession planning to get new anchors in the retail area. In the large office development, we've taken stock of our office in the city, and we're encouraging updates to office space. We're also trying to secure new anchor office tenants. To the income tax point, the large office tenants, we're really focusing on those who do at least 150% of minimum wage to try to bring in some higher income tax on those areas. And then manufacturing, our biggest focus with manufacturing right now is securing a strong, sustainable workforce. So Kathy is on a collaboration team with some of our manufacturers in the schools to try to build the next generation of workforce, to get them interested in manufacturing, understanding that it's a really high-tech, clean place to work. It's not what, the 1920s industry used to be. It's very advanced, and trying to grow our own manufacturing employees from the roots. And then on the development, land is very limited in Painesville. We have to do some in-depth look at our development opportunities. That'll come with the comprehensive plan, but we're also aware of the few pieces of land we do have, and making sure that if someone is to come in and fill those, that they come in with jobs and be able to assist us on the income tax side. To speak to the income tax, in 2019, Finance and Economic Development have spent a lot of time working together, focusing on that issue. Although We are concerned about income tax. A lot of the goals that have been set don't necessarily feed a high level of income tax. So the redevelopment of the downtown, Richmond Street corridor, that focus on redoing those areas are great long-term sustainable projects for the community, but those retail facilities that we're bringing in, for instance, Chipotle, do not pay as much as, say, the VA doctors that used to be in that facility. So although it's great for the community and it's a great effort to rebuild and bring vitality to our community, it's not necessarily feeding the goal of a high income tax revenue. So that brings us to some opportunities and challenges. We definitely have a couple of collaborations that are going on that we need to continue to foster. So the Paynesville City Schools has a community action team, which several members of staff are on. We're working close with the school on initiatives you saw in this presentation, as well as helping them integrate into the whole community a little bit better, so it's a win-win. We do have a beginnings of a collaboration with the Lake County Council on Aging. Some administrators from Lake County met last week to talk about how we can better collaborate for our senior population. So I do plan to ask the representative council to come on board and help me with that discussion. We continue to move forward with the homeless task force to talk about ways to at least remedy some of the perception issues around homelessness and maybe find some new avenues for those homeless in our community. And then economic development collaboration is alongside the workforce development with our manufacturers and school systems. So sustainability is a concern. Our expenses are increasing faster than our revenues. We are deficit spending in several funds. As of today, as I haven't gotten to the cutting part yet, but we are definitely deficit spending in some major funds. Some of our economic development goals will not have significant impact on income tax growth. And then without the police levy, there are definitely specific goals that cannot be met. I did add a goal at the end here. Andy and I would really like to spend some time with council throughout 2020 talking about fiscal sustainability and some revenue requirements that are needed throughout the different funds. I do just want to add, I forgot to put it in the presentation, but so for 2018 and 19, internally we worked a lot on service fees, making sure that we were charging appropriately benchmarked against other communities, things like cemeteries and rentals and things like that. So we made updates to those fees in 18 and some in 19. We're at the point where there's really no more place for us to increase fees. So we started to look at specific areas where we could cut services. And I did bring to Finance Committee, and I just want to make all of council aware that the budget, I will have in there that we're outsourcing building inspection to Lake County Building Department. It will be a net savings of around $100,000 a year to our general fund, well, to all funds, $20,000 to general fund. So that will be built into the budget. And even with that outsourcing and the revenue increases we've done internally, we're still budget deficit in the general fund as of right now. So.
Question?
So I know that when you go to your one of the first slides where you had the schedule, I know that when we talked to Finance Committee, the budgets were sent out to the staff for their expenses, salaries, paper clips, that kind of stuff. And then they were also going to come back with capital. It was kind of a two-step process. Is that So how does that reflect in there?
So that's where you see around September 24th, where the final draft is
Yes.
sitting manager. So that's where we'll have the budget, at least to a final draft form, and know what's left to do our capital with.
Okay.
And then Andy and I will sit down and do capital, which is then why we're coming back on October 8th to present and justify the capital budget to council.
So the budget that's gonna come to you on the 24th is just strictly turn the lights on? You know, having the salaries and the,
Yeah, so
And,
everything between the 16th all the way until the 24th is
Mhm.
just operation and maintenance.
just operation?
Because we have to balance the budget, we have to make sure we have 20 to 25% in the fund balance for general fund, for council policy, and then whatever's left, we can use for capital.
One of the thoughts I had, Monica, was that I feel like as a council, we've been talking for a number of years about deficit spending in some of our funds. And I feel like there has been some efforts that we've made to increase revenue. But it just doesn't seem like it's ever really enough, you know? Passing the levy for the road is a good example. Looking at the fees is another good example. The infrastructure water fee, you know, I can think of a few things like that. And I feel like council's been supportive of increasing revenues, but it doesn't seem like it's enough. And am I wrong in thinking that it never is enough? I mean, there's just so much that goes into running the city. As far as expense goes.
So it's not enough for the amount of service that we provide today. If, for instance, we increase revenue through either the tax, income tax credit, or through actually increasing the income tax, it would be incumbent upon all of us to not add services on top of that increase. That whatever that increase is just to help us get by. We won't be able to promise anything new. I think every time we've offered some new fee or new revenue, we've also offered a new service tied to it. So we've spent everything that we've brought in without building in that sustainability buffer.
So like in some of the accounts that we're talking about utilities, I think we're talking about the water treatment plant and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yep.
And the efforts that we're making to consider increasing fees and all that, we would still have to increase the income tax. And that's the goal, really. The ultimate goal is to increase our income taxes.
So although our enterprise funds do transfer to the general fund to help cover like my salary or, you know, people who are across all the umbrellas, so finance and HR and that kind of stuff. Although the enterprise funds do help with that impact, they can't replace income tax because the majority of the general fund is paid for from either user fees or income tax. And so I guess the answer is, although we've been making increases in water or sewer, or we're hoping to make increases in water, but we have in sewer, it doesn't necessarily impact the general fund.
Right. But it doesn't take any burden off the general fund, is what you're
Right.
saying.
Yeah.
I guess in my mind, Lori, you know, in terms of the, you know, the water and the electric and so forth, and those departments, as they're somewhat should be running independently, and obviously we increase salaries 2-3% a year. But the question is have we increased our revenues 2-3% a year to match that, as well as have capital projects to replace equipment and facilities as time goes on? And for me, the answer is no, we have not done that. We haven't had that systematic approach to looking at how many trucks, buildings. You know, a good example is down in the stores, they didn't have a lift that could actually lift the truck off the ground so they could work underneath. 2 years ago, when we went down there, they're on the floor, rolling underneath it, trying to do maintenance. Well, if you ever work like that, that just doesn't work.
Yeah, but at what point do you outsource that instead? You know, at what point do you start considering outsourcing the maintenance?
Well,
of those
and
vehicles?
I think that's why when it becomes, when you're looking at it a yearly basis, but how many times have we gone 5, 6, 7 years and we haven't increased any water, electric, anything, and then all of a sudden, you know, 7 or 8 years down the road, we haven't increased anything, and now we're showing a projection of $100,000 in the red.
Look, yeah, but we're talking about increasing those, and those are considered those enterprise funds that don't affect the general fund. So even if we talk about that, it's not impacting the general fund. And the biggest expense to the general fund is employees.
Well, yes, I mean, obviously, we're a service organization. Police and fire and administration is definitely a service organization. But in order to house that personnel, if we have 45 police officers and we have 41 firemen, the fire people, they gotta go somewhere. And if we got staff, they gotta go somewhere too. And, you know, we've heard the fire chief, the past couple fire chiefs say they would prefer to have multiple firehouses throughout the city, you know, as relates to response time. And there's a couple of times, well, the last time before this, or 2 times, that they had talked about, you know, maybe adding that on to the fire levy that we would be looking at. I think that, and one of the things over the last several years that I've heard is, you know, that council would like more information, be more involved in the budgetary process, so we don't come at the end of the line and all of a sudden we can't do roads, we have no money for roads, we have no money for a ladder truck, we have no money for police cars.
Yeah, and I know we talked about that at the meeting that we had, and I had shared that I think that, you know, that this administration has done a much better job of including council along the way than we have in the past. And I do again say that council, I think, has been supportive of, you know, fee changes and re-looking at things and doing studies and stuff like that. So I'm not saying that we don't need more money. I'm just saying at what point,
Well,
you
we
know,
are,
for the general fund, at what point do we start saying, and like what Monica said is when we increase, what we can't do is offer more services with that increase, correct? So even at that, I'm imagining that it won't be enough.
well, and I guess I go back to economic development then. You know, we're trying to build businesses that are already housed here, and we're trying to attract new ones. And the question is do we have process and procedures in place that are doing just that? Have we put enough money into the budget with personnel, because a lot of it is personnel in terms of meeting with businesses, working with businesses. You know, have we earmarked enough money to have one person working with the businesses that are currently here, and we have enough money for working with trying to attract new businesses? And if
Well,
we are
but we've
trying-
added to that, Jim, like, you know, we've added the bar to Kathy, now we're looking at Kathy's salary. We've got that one computer program to help Kathy to be able to find other places. So I guess what I'm just sharing is that and Monica, maybe you could speak in here, is do you feel that council has been supportive of helping to grow the revenues of the city and look at those areas that are weak and get involved in making the necessary changes to strengthen those areas? For instance, economic development.
I can say that when we do talk about it, we have made progress. I think this group has definitely made progress together to do what we need to do. But I don't think we'll ever have enough will to do absolutely everything we need to do. Because at this point, because of things like waiting from 2011 to today to do water rate increases, what we should be asking for is significantly higher than what we're actually asking for. And we'll show that tonight. It's a piece we show finance committee, we never show the rest of the council, so we'll show that tonight. So, because it got kicked down the road, I think this council is seeing a lot of what happens when you kick things down the road. And now it's catch-up time, but how much are we willing to put in to catch up? And that's where things like, okay, outsourcing, as you brought up. We do look at that almost every year. I pick something that's costing us more than what it should. I sit down with that department, we talk about, this is what the private sector can do, this is what we can do. If it's possible that I could bring on one more full-time person and it would still be cheaper than outsourcing to the private sector, I would bring that analysis to you guys. I would show you that that's the possibility. At this point, we're pretty well bare minimum in every single department. So it's either we continue to do the services that we are providing, or we start cutting back on major services. And we're going to have to cut, if we're not going after police and fire, which is loud and clear, don't touch police and fire, then the other 17 departments that are general fund dependent, but only take up 46% of the general fund budget, we have to cut a lot more from the 17 other departments to make an impact.
So go back to loud and clear, don't cut fire and police.
Yeah.
Is that loud and clear in opposition to what administration thinks? Does the administration think there's room for cuts there? And that a council is antagonistic of that or blocking
I don't
that?
think there's room for cuts. I'm saying that if there's no revenue increase, cuts have to happen. And the most impactful cuts to the general fund are police and fire. I'm not saying I want them cut. I'm not saying they need to be cut. We're already bare minimum in every single department. There is not a fat department anywhere in the city. I can honestly say we are as lean can be. But that also means that sometimes the services aren't as great as they could be, or we're not as responsive as some of our customers want us to be, because we're beyond lean. So the conversation now and in 2020, which is what I hope we spend some really quality time talking about, is the revenue requirements to keep up the services we already provide. We're talking about completely eliminating segments of services, because those right now are only two options.
Have you looked at, do you have in your head what services you would want to start with? Or is that?
For cutting?
Yes.
No, I don't. Because to meet the 4 goals of council, I can't think of one thing we provide that is like, oh, that doesn't meet any of those goals, goodbye, easy peasy. I think those were cut probably way back in 2008 when the recession hit. Since the recession, we haven't come back as quickly as the rest of the economy has, but we continue to do the same services and sometimes more services than what we did back then.
And one of our biggest handicaps, would you agree, is that we don't have the variety of or the amount of property we need to really develop manufacturing and industry and areas like that, which would provide more income tax dollars.
So now that we've lost, let's just say we've lost Shamrock for now. Now that we've lost that giant piece of property, there are very few areas. There's only about 10 acres left in our industrial park that's buildable. And there's only the corner of Richmond and Richmond that's buildable. And that's kind of city, but not really city. So what we put on that property is very important, because we don't get any of the property tax on that piece of property. So the only thing that's going to be impactful to us is industrial. So there's conversations like that where council needs to understand it may not be something pretty sitting upon that hill, but it's something impactful that's going to be long-term and sustainable for the community.
Let's take 3 minutes, grab dinner, and come back and continue this. Well, you can get 3 minutes.
Yeah, don't try.
You get many.
Yeah, don't try.
Sure.
So what you're saying is you could see police officers on the streets.
Basically, yeah.
This is parking on the streets,
Oh,
parking in driveways. Parking later tonight.
Oh,
I thought it was about parking lots.
oh. Yeah.
That's
Another big
Yeah, a whole
discussion.
other.
Speaking of parking, I see they're building the wall.
Yeah, the retention wall.
So, when do you think that, is it gonna be done by October or when?
What's the parking lot,
They
completion?
had 90 days, but from the time we started, which was
2 weeks ago.
sometime in November. But
Oh, yeah, because the last day before asphalt was the last day they were.
they're gonna be
taking.
done way before that.
Yeah.
They're almost done with the retaining wall right now.
And how about Jackson Street? Are they almost done fixing the curves and raising the manhole covers and stuff?
Jackson Street looked like it was. I mean,
They
it was
did
big.
the super lining this week. The final coat was supposed to be on last week or the week before, but that's what
It
you.
looks like it's ready.
It's ready.
It's getting close.
It is getting close. It's hard to have construction on Menor Avenue and
I
Jackson.
think it is. They put some new sidewalks in along
Right, they were putting
Jackson.
sidewalks.
The curb.
Or not
ramps.
By your old house, just
curb ramps.
Curb ramps, yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Still,
that's what they were
there's still
looking
one
at.
at Jackson and Knoll that has to go in, I believe. There's a big hole there. So there's a couple of.
Once that's done, the top coat shouldn't take a day, it shouldn't take that long to finish it off.
And brand new curves in some of, in some of the locations.
Well, the people over by Cedarburg are extremely happy. Cedarburg Elementary.
Are
That
happy?
section,
Oh,
are happy.
good.
That section
Main
of
Street
Elementary.
School or that road?
Yeah.
It's a small section.
So from a layman's position, a lot of this issue has been because of reduced interest rates, less revenue coming in from the state is causing problems with the general fund.
Those are pieces of it, yes.
And you can't touch any of the utility money for general fund use,
We have,
other than some salaries that support the functions of the utility.
so the appropriation from the utilities to general fund is tapped out. Where at the top, there's nothing more to tap.
So you are left with cutting police, fire, and other departments,
Right,
or increasing taxes,
correct.
either through the tax levy, like right now, people get a
2%.
reciprocal arrangement.
100% tax credit.
And you would take a 75 or 50 of that, okay?
That's the only fluffy one.
And that's
So the credit,
I was gonna say, I always
council's able to change on their own. It doesn't
No.
But if you increase the tax rate from 2% to
You got to go.
you have to go to the vote.
that'll,
Where was he?
haven't been that flush.
I think,
It always seems like those
I think
Going back to the
Lakeland maybe
website.
asked
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
Someone
But there are other areas who had actually cut the reciprocal arrangement.
Yes.
That's the easy fix.
That's the more important piece.
Yeah.
Still not easy. I mean, anytime you
Or you got your choice, cutting police, fire, and all these others.
Yeah, and that's actually no longer the curriculum, it's like a different.
Okay.
And I wouldn't even mind that presentation, just for my,
Yeah, I think
Everybody else.
because I think sometimes they tend to think of these kids, I mean, so many of them have mental health.
Yeah, I can see
It's
it.
a huge percentage. And I feel like they don't.
And he says,
It's really
He said, "One month last time, he goes,
And we've done some trauma work, and they get talked about.
You have a business in your
Yeah,
town.
he goes, "Question."
When, if you're a business,
it's gonna happen."
you live here, you have a business here,
what is it?
Any other city, they get the revenue, they get the revenue.
Oh, that's for.
Oh, yeah.
And
75% of
No interest rates.
Yeah.
You usually have money in the general fund, in the bank, okay, and you get 7%. Now you get
10%
Right, exactly.
just eliminate some.
So,
And that's not incorporating.
and the state is, other funds are like,
Almost 30%. That does nothing for the work. Crazy money.
You're gonna pay, leave it in-house, you're gonna pay 0.5%. Or.
Makes everyone happy. We're kidding, city, pay the 1, 2 and a quarter, or we do 4, and people that live in
You got more?
Increase in tax will not be reciprocal. She just said.
Huh?
No,
No, no, it's not.
That's the.
Oh, but yes, petition.
no,
No.
just me.
Yeah. I guess the thing is, and if you take a look at for 2020, it would be Andy's projections on what the revenue is gonna be. And then from there, like Monica was saying, there's somewhat two ways to go about it. Cut 10% across the board, or just eliminate one section of it, some services.
So I am not a huge fan of cross-border cuts. I believe that the cost of government should be based on priorities of the community, and that there should be really thoughtful conversation about where our priorities are, and then funding the top priorities. And if you're below that line and we have no more revenue, all of those services go away. Because if you do across the board, you're hurting the top priority and the least priority. And it's just not a healthy way to place your money.
I appreciate that.
And a 10% cut to say finance, does it nearly have the same effect as a 10% cut as police and fire?
Oh, absolutely huge, probably even better.
Yeah,
Well, I
right.
guess
Well,
my
let's
question-
just say, for instance, you get rid of an employee in finance who's making 100,000. Due to our distributions and unemployment, general fund would save $10,000.
Well, I mean, the other way to do it is do it proportionately. If you need $200,000 or $300,000,
Yeah,
you figure it's a percentage of all the departments across
Yeah.
the West. So I guess, as talk with Andy, or asking Andy, what are other projections for 2020? And, Monica indicating that we're gonna be in a deficit mode for 2020. I mean, is that kind of what you're seeing?
yeah, Monica and I went over the revenues, and we went over every revenue for every single function in the city. And then we came up with, okay, here's our numbers, and granted, I'm conservative with the numbers, but this year, our income tax, we budgeted 8.2 for 2019. It's gonna be tough to reach that number. And usually, we have a little play in there. This year, I don't know, if we might make it, we might not, but it's gonna be close.
So I would say, I'm just gonna interrupt for a second. Prior to me coming here, there may have been more of a cushion and more conservative budget than what we've been doing the last 3 years. The last 3 years are closer to what the actual revenue and expenses are than what you're used to seeing. So there's not a huge fluff there. There is some, obviously, because we're both conservative people, but it's not like, oh, there's gonna be an extra million at the end of the year. Don't worry about it. It's not like that.
I feel like when I came aboard on council, one of the things that I saw was the large disparity between how much money in property taxes goes to the school and how much goes to the city.
Right.
And one of the things I would share is that I believe in lower socioeconomic areas, the emphasis for the population and something they always support, the residents always support our education, increases for property tax dollars for education. And when they're taxed so high on that, then the council is low on pushing for levies and things like that. And I've always felt that our residents would be supportive of levies if we would just put them out there for them to be supportive of. Because there's something that isn't seen, like, yeah, great, you can put all kinds of money into the education system, but if you can't bring those kids out of the system and to work and live in your community, then you're spending all this money on the kids, on the students, so that they can go somewhere else and pay income taxes, and it's not coming back to our own community. So this partnership with the schools, and I know that they've worked on it before, but then the other piece for them is to see that when we invest in the community and we put money into roads and infrastructure and housing stock and that sort of thing, then we draw a different crowd of, it raises the standard income tax level of the people that live here, and the housing property values go up and things like that, but then we also get a better, the student population has a better caliber, and then we change test scores. So that problem has been, I think it's been a push-pull for a long time, and it's something that lower socioeconomic communities they kind of cling to the idea that if we just educate these kids, they'll get out of poverty, but we'll leave the community in poverty, and we'll be an impoverished community. It's just that we'll raise these kids up and they'll go somewhere else and learn. All 4 of my kids went through Kingsville School. All 4 of them got great educations. One has a PhD. One's working in Miami. One's working in Louisiana. They don't have any interest in being in this community. So some of this work that we're doing with the schools and growing leaders for tomorrow and getting kids involved in manufacturing and then actually having the companies here for them to work in is really a huge piece. And I think that our state government is supportive of these kind of initiatives. So, I don't think that you guys are asking for too much, and I don't disagree that we have been underinvesting in our community and the resources in our community and the administration that is involved in running the community. I don't disagree with that. But it's really hard to get people out of that view of, hey, we're just going to educate all these kids and get them out of poverty. And so what? Painesville too.
I guess what I hear Monica saying is that, all right, there's deficits on the horizon.
Mm-hmm.
Looking for some guidance from council as to if we're $100,000 in the red next year, from our priorities, which at one point in time were, safety and security, police, fire. My computer come back on. And then I think the next thing was infrastructure. And then, hang on a minute, my computer went to sleep. It was improving, the third thing was improving housing stock. Then we were looking at economic development, increased tax revenue. And then there were some minor things, depending on who you talk to, because they are major. Street parking issues, and then some of the activities that we have for middle school kids and our seniors. And the street parking issues, before I go back to my first thought, that might have to do with the planning commission in terms of the developments and such that we're allowing. The setback from the road, I know in a couple developments, if you try to park 2 SUVs, you're blocking the sidewalk, and that's a problem. Or the width of the road, you park your car in the road, and all of a sudden you got a problem because cars can't get around, or the...
Yeah, but that's good, but you can't change communities that are already established. They already have driveways the size they have. They're already as close to the sidewalk as they are.
Right, I get that. I'm talking about new development
Right.
going in, so that we're not repeating the problems that we created from the past.
So we have an entire presentation last night. We'll talk about the
Okay.
street parking tonight. Let's go back to your priorities.
Okay.
police, fire, infrastructure, economic development. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, I guess I do have one question. You mentioned that before we came back, Ray had asked a question about
Yeah.
revenues. You had said that you could either lower the credit, and that's something that council can do,
Correct,
or you can increase the tax.
correct.
So I guess I'd like an opinion on if you if you change the percentage, that, and I say penalize, because it sure would only penalize residents of Painesville. So any increase is just because I no longer, when I get my city tax, if I worked in Mentor, and I paid $1,000 in city tax, and I only owed Painesville $1,000. But because of the reciprocation, I didn't have to do anything. But now if we lower it to 75%, then I would have to give them 25. You would have to give them more money, correct? Just me. It has nothing to do with reciprocation. It's nothing to do with anybody not living in Painesville.
That's a tough one.
So if you, let's say you live in the township, but you work in Painesville,
Correct.
you're still paying income tax in
Correct.
Painesville.
But
And let's say you did choose to go up to 2.5% on income tax. So I live in Painesville, but I work in Mentor. But Mentor's tax rate is only 2%. Then you would be paying the city 0.5%.
and I would pay the city 0.5%, whether there was 100% reciprocation or whether it was only 75.
If there was 100% reciprocation,
Like we have today.
75 would be a different calculation.
So, right, so if I happen to be working in one of those JED places where they only take out 1.75 and I live in Painesville, I have to, in my Rita's form, I have to give Painesville their full 2%, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that would affect, I guess you answered my question. A rate increase is going to affect everyone. Workers as well as, a tax increase is going to affect everyone, workers as well as residents. If you just change the reciprocation level for city of Painesville, that's only going to affect our residents. They're going to have to pay more if they don't work here,
Yes,
correct?
yeah, but they also receive the same services.
Well, I guess what I was looking, the way I was, where my brain was going with this, Lori, was, if I have a choice, I guess, it would be an easier, and maybe the numbers would not bear this out, I don't know, maybe Monica or Nancy could answer that, but, if I'm gonna try to get more revenue, then I think maybe we would rather increase the percentage, go to 2.15 or 2.25, because everybody that works in the county is gonna pay 2.25, and so we're gonna get more revenue, is that correct? Instead of 2% we pay today, if it went to 2.25, everybody's gonna pay that, whether it's resident or employee that does not live here.
As long as they don't live in a community that has that same or higher tax.
Correct, and there's very few, most of them are 2%, there's very few that are higher right now.
Quite a few are starting to look at moving them up to 2.5.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of interest.
Well, I'm just saying, but from a resident perspective, if I'm gonna vote for something, I wanna distribute that pain to everybody, workers as well as residents, because it's a better advantage. So in terms of, it may even be an easier sell on Turtle, because I'm gonna pay it, yes, but so is my coworker who lives in Mentor,
Right.
they're gonna pay it too. Whereas if I just change my reciprocation, the only people that are gonna do that are the people that live in Painesville, that work in Painesville, or that live in Painesville and work elsewhere.
But the income tax credit gets approved by council, not by the voters.
I understand.
So that could be.
Right. Yeah, but from an easy, well, yes, too bad, so sad, we're doing it anyway kind of thing, sure.
From a process, yes.
Yes.
From a process, yes.
But the reality is, we're here about it.
Mhm.
And we're gonna hear about it either way, so I'm thinking, is everybody has to suffer that pain. Employees that live outside the city as well as people that live in the city. That to me is, it seems like more revenue.
I think maybe council's always thought that we wanted to give an advantage to people who want them to live here. So to give them that advantage, if we aren't doing the reciprocity, more people would want to live here. The question is, if that is the theory, how successful has that been?
Right.
I mean, if it hasn't been successful for this long, you know, and then maybe the other piece is that, I mean, I hate to say this, but it sounds really, maybe I'm being too honest when I say this, but as you raise the cost of living here for those that live here, you start to lose the people that can't afford to live here. And is that such a bad thing? Is that where council wants to go? I think in the past, councils have tried to protect the people, and that's why they've been conservative, I think. I mean, that's my theory. I don't know if it's exactly true, because you don't want to.
Well, if you do take a global picture, our property tax rate is high in
Yes.
Gainesville. It's not a city property tax rate, but it is an overall property tax rate because of the county levies, as well as the school levies. So when people hear us talk about water rate increases, or electric restructuring, or income tax increases, in their mind, they can't afford to live here anymore because the overall picture seems very expensive.
Right.
So I do understand why councils in the past have taken that into consideration, but at the same time, we're definitely at a breaking point where if we don't make some tough decisions in the next year, we're gonna be in a pretty bad place.
But really, with our housing stock, 50% being rentals and 50% being homeownership, the burden of the property tax, 50% of that's on somebody who doesn't, well, with the exception of Kelly Amos, who doesn't really live here. You know, most of your tenants or landlords, some of them, a lot of your landlords live here, but what I'm thinking is, if I've got a tenant, I'm just going to, and I pay more of property tax, even when all these things pass, we're just passing that cost on to the rest. That particular owner is not paying any more. So in reality, it's the actual residents that are really fitting the burden, feeling more of a burden on the other 50% homeowners are feeling the burden as opposed to the tenants in the land.
So my concern is that if we're looking at a deficit in 2020, after doing this for 7 years, I know that if we have a small deficit next year, it gets progressively bigger year by year.
So this year was a small deficit.
Yes.
This was the first actual budgeted deficit we've had since 2013
or something.
It
was it?
And
was
190,000 in the general fund.
Okay. So I guess what I would love from the administration, and I don't know if anybody else agrees to this, is if politics were removed and we made hard decisions, what would they look like? Because I think we spend a lot of time looking at, well, Katie and Christine and Paul and Nick are up for re-election, and they may not want to make these tough choices, and we'll do the 25% instead of the 75% that we think would be better. I want to know from the administration what those hard decisions are and what they look like. If we really dig down and do what we have to do, what does that look like? Because, like you said, it's only going to get worse. We need to do something soon, and somebody's always getting reelected.
So in your projection then, are you looking for across the board cuts or elimination of a certain service?
Well, Monica's already said she is not in favor of across the board cuts,
Well,
and I would agree with that.
okay, right, that's what I'm asking for the rest of the council, they go along with that too.
Okay.
I would go along with that. I would agree with Monica that it makes sense that we have to decide what our priorities are and budget accordingly. Across the board cuts doesn't address the issues that we want to address.
Well, I'd like to think by now, as a council, we've made our priorities fairly well known. So hopefully Monica has the framework and Andy.
Is there a number that council is comfortable with for the general fund deficit, if you want a deficit spending in
No,
2020?
I don't think we want.
I don't
Because in
think we want it.
2019, you guys were okay with 190,000.
You guys remember that for some reason?
Well, it was in all our budget stuff, so, and I made it very
I'm
clear.
not saying it wasn't.
Yeah,
I'm
You're lying
saying-
in.
yeah, right.
One of the things that, tell me where I'm wrong in my thinking, because I'm probably wrong in my thinking about this. One of the things when we were looking for is revenue that isn't, like, income tax dollars or revenue that isn't guaranteed, right? That's a good way to put it. So like, when we were looking last year, I think we knew that there were several, I knew that there were several projects going on in the community that would have contractors in here and more people paying taxes. So my expectation is that the revenues we took in would be a bit higher than those projected. And to me, $100,000 or $150,000 was a small amount percentage in comparison to our overall.
We lost more income tax in businesses than we brought in additional revenues.
And a good bit of that was the two companies that underestimated.
We had some very large companies that that had huge net losses, that had to get big refunds last year, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right. And so that was the reason for that.
Yes, so for last year, we budgeted 8.2, we came in at 8.3, and that was probably our lowest income tax we've had since 2012. This year, we budgeted 8.2. We're on pace for maybe getting that.
And I hate to call it a margin of error, because it's not really an error.
I would say it's shrinking. Our comfort level, our cushion in that number is definitely shrinking.
Yes.
And the new city county employees.
That'll bring in additional revenues, but we are losing, we have companies that used to be working 2 shifts, now they're down to 1, and they're automating more.
There are a couple companies that lost large contracts that then had to lay off employees, so we are getting hit on that.
So 16 years ago, we just cut 5% off of each of the departments. And then it went another 5%.
It's not uncommon for some to do that. I just feel the more sustainable route to go is to fund your highest priorities first.
I hear it.
And then just cut other services after that point.
I couldn't get toner cartridges and stuff there.
So, I mean, there will be a point if we don't increase revenue and find a more sustainable plan that there will literally be entire departments that need to go away. And in order to do that, I mean, it would be detrimental to the entire community.
Where's our seniors?
What?
Where's our seniors?
What do you mean, where are we?
Oh, are they supposed to be here? So-
Next council meeting.
Oh, good.
Oh, I was like, what do you mean, where are our seniors now?
They canceled so many times.
We pay them $25,000 a year, that's where our seniors are.
Well, all right.
All general fund money.
Ray?
Paul, thank you for recognizing me. As a resident, I think you got a communications problem here in terms of selling any increase in revenue or tax revenue. And I think part of the issue is you got to tell them, look, services are going to be cut, and you've taken off the table across-the-board cuts to police and fire, etc. I'm not sure that's wise, because then you say, okay, we're going to have to cut somewhere, either a department or across the board, or raise tax revenues. The other issue is you haven't communicated the fact that all your utilities are essentially separate and can't be touched. That's not where you're going to get general revenue money from. And the other thing is you haven't communicated the fact that tax revenues have gone down substantially over the last several years. So that's the communication problem and the sales job you got to do to residents such as me.
Well, I would say during the tax budget, Andy did an excellent job explaining just how bad of a financial state we are in the tax.
And where is that on the communications channel, the web, your website, et cetera, and communicate it to residents? That's my point.
The
I
expectation.
mean, maybe you got it, great.
Well, I think what you're saying, Ray, is the expectation is, if our expectation is that our residents are gonna go read that and look at that, that ain't gonna happen. So we need to, what I'm hearing from you is there needs to be more extraneous communication with our residents to say, hey, we got a deficit, and this is what's happening. So this is not a shock.
Now, I think that's part of the issue. The other issue is you take it to a bulk for increasing tax load. And that's a sales job in and of itself, quite honestly. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
I'm sorry, and maybe Monica got this better, but I'm still looking for guidance. We have budget hearings coming up. And are you guys comfortable with the budget deficit, or you want nothing? Because we're not gonna have time to go through the budget hearings twice.
Well, I think what council is saying is, we probably wouldn't be comfortable or uncomfortable, because we don't know what cuts you're talking about. We know it's it's.
$365,329.
Okay,
And what
That's-
the deficit would be this year?
That's the general
2020.
20, right now, that's what's in the system now. Granted,
That's
Monica and I, 2020, granted,
Okay.
Monica and I haven't gone through and cut out anything, but right now on the books, that's where we're at for 2020.
So is it possible to, and I realize, is it possible to get the presentation with the budget, with that deficit, and then say, to fix this deficit, we would have to do A, B, and C?
kind of like when you bid a contract and you put alternates.
I guarantee it's gonna be, and I know you're not happy with this, it'd have to be police and fire, because that's what closest we get to 100%. Or, like Monica said, we are wiping out all departments.
Well, I guess, when you say police and fire, I think what council's looking for, what you mean, police and fire?
Yeah, what does that look like?
What
Is that
services
no more
actually-
cars? Is that-
I mean, you call 911, and
Employees.
from 11 o'clock to 3 o'clock, no one's gonna be coming?
It would be employees. That's where we get the biggest
What?
pay. Employees, police and fire employees. Well, that's me financially, I'm not talking politics.
Right.
Well, but I mean, when you say biggest
Yeah,
bang,
we-
obviously,
So let's say
I think we're looking,
$100,000
what's that
for,
translated to services?
$100,000 for police officer or firefighter.
yeah,
99% of that is general fund money.
yeah, yeah, so, but I mean, so biggest bang versus,
So, city
Versus
manager
what?
makes
You know, what is the
$100,000 a year, it would be a $20,000.
But then we have thrown unemployment, so we save $10,000 in the general fund.
But if we did a across the board cut of 5% on every department, what number would we be looking at, Andy? Would we be looking at that 365,000?
So,
But I don't think we should cut
I
the
don't-
water department.
I don't think we need to fix the deficit issue tonight. I
Okay.
think what Andy's asking for is there a level of deficit you're comfortable with? And if so,
No more than last year, would be my,
And I'll get you guys all the stuff, because I made it stick out loud and clear, that we do have 190 for this year. Maybe there is some number you guys are comfortable with for 2020.
well,
If you're gonna have us get to zero, it is going to be extremely difficult.
and again, one question, when I'm thinking about a police levy, if it were to pass, if I remember correctly, there is 3 officers that we could be hiring in there.
correct.
What if we don't hire them? There's 300,000 right there.
Yeah, but I don't think the police levy is
Right.
supposed to be supplementing the general fund.
Right.
It
And
wasn't
we
proposed that.
also
Right.
promised the police union that we would follow that plan as closely as possible, which is why they're fighting so hard for it.
But
So that would be a
You're right,
complete
though.
but we
repeat.
can't,
hire
yeah, we
three,
can't use
but
the
we
levy to
let
hire
one
3
go.
and fire 3.
Yeah.
We,
Sorry.
that's kind of a nightmare.
Bye, Tony.
I guess I have a problem with saying that we have a deficit, but everybody has the budget that they had last year. You know, that's where I go to. So when we're talking to our department heads and we're telling them what their budget is, and we're recognizing that we're having a deficit, then I'm wondering, why are we offering the same budget as last
Or
year?
do we cut a road?
Well, isn't the roads in the same thing, isn't the roads in the same thing where there's dedicated?
That's
funds
really
to
not gonna
roads?
save the general fund deficit.
Correct.
So there's a difference between starting to nip into council's policy of the 20% fund balance and running a deficit. So a deficit means that we're spending more than what we're bringing in.
Right.
But we still have
We
the
can
20%.
balance the budget by using some carryover, but that only fixes the hole for a year or
Three
two.
carryovers.
The sustainability of that is not long-term. So as we're plugging the hole in the boat, we want to know what we're going to do to solve the problem so that by the time that carryover plug is gone and we have no more help to get a balanced budget, the deficit is fixed. So that's why I'm saying we don't need to solve it tonight, and Andy and I would like to spend a lot of time in 2020 diving deep and talking about this more so that the decisions that are made are long-term sustainable, well understood. This
And I think that comes back to what Katie said in terms of if we have a 3 to 5 year projection, are we making these cuts deeper and deeper in the next 3 years?
Well, and I feel like when I came on council, that's the state we were in. My first year was 2012, and we were digging deeper each year, and we were finally able to breathe a little bit the last, 3 or 4 years. And so, we already went through this, well, we need to make hard choices, but we never made those hard choices.
We did lay off some part-time employees back.
We did, but
Yeah,
that's,
right, right.
we played the safe route.
Mhm.
And we hoped, but like, we can't continue to do that. I feel like we've kind of, yes, we're catching the tail end of some, maybe not favorable decisions that were made before our time, as far as how to manage the city and funds and things like that. But I also think, like, we just we're gonna have to make some tough choices. And, for me, obviously, you guys are gonna have to figure out what those are out, but I think it's important to not dumb them down for us in a political way.
And I guess I look at it the way I'm thinking, the direction that I would like to see, that I would give you, I don't know what everybody else is going to say, but the direction that I would want to say is, I wouldn't want to see you budget any more than the deficit that we had this year. Because if we're gonna take 2020 to really dive into that and try and find ways to eliminate that deficit, then I'm willing to say, I wouldn't want to go any higher than we went this year. And if we could go 10% less than that, that would be super. But from my perspective, as long as we've made a commitment from the administration to really go in and try and fix this plug this hole, then I'm willing to look at it from that perspective, but just this year. I don't want to come back in 2020 and go, now we got another, I mean, we may have a smaller one, but I want to see that deficit go down. I don't want to see that deficit go up.
Well, but the problem with that, Christina, is the administration can give us stuff all day. If we aren't willing to put some skin in the game. I mean, we as a council have to agree.
I feel like we have been putting skin in the game as a council.
I agree, but I'm just saying, like, we have to agree that we will stick with this conversation and follow through and make the hard choices.
And when 2020 rolls around, now let it go.
We have, as a council, we have to say that this is.
That this is the line in the sand, this is the priority. But to Kate, since Andy says we cannot do 2 budget hearings and he really is looking for direction, then I'm saying, based upon the fact that we're gonna really work hard in 2020 as a council and as administration to fix this, that's the direction I'm considering. But I don't know what everybody else, that's me, it's just me.
We have to cut basically $170,000 in expenses to get to the same deficit we have in 2019. Or find an offsetting revenue, which we've pretty much already exhausted everything.
So what am I hearing back from you is you really want to see it at 350,000?
No, I don't.
No.
I'm asking for direction as to what's the number you guys are comfortable with.
Okay.
So, at the end of the day, it is the city manager who has to bring a budget to council. It's the responsibility of the city manager to do the tax budget, the annual budget, and the appropriations ordinance. I think what Andy's trying to do is say, at what comfort level is an unbalanced deficit budget okay with this council?
My question for Andy is, what is your comfort level?
Yeah, that's probably good.
And you don't want to.
Don't
better
say
stick
that,
with mine.
because
Andy's like zero,
He's a treasurer.
balance, yeah. So, I mean, like, it's hard to say, for me, it's hard to say, oh, well, 215, I'm good there.
Yeah.
Do your
Well,
best.
obviously, we won't be able to have money in the account so we can write checks and pay people.
Yes.
Okay.
So we can't do that.
I mean, I would say we need to be on a holding pattern for the year, as
Yeah.
far as projects and things like that go. Anything that isn't a necessity to happen shouldn't be happening. Capital improvement, things like that.
But the problem with capital improvements isn't really going to affect this. These are all operating revenues and expenses. Capital's handled after the fact.
So capital would help us balance the budget, but it doesn't help the deficit. Because again, it's what's coming in versus what's going out.
What about vehicles?
That's capital as
That's
well.
capital, yeah.
Yeah. Again, it would help us balance the budget,
Yeah.
but it doesn't help with the deficit issue.
So we're talking about personnel, operating expenses, fuel, maintenance, you know, everything we need to operate.
Yeah, the smart meters.
So, how about we assume that Andy and I just have to do our best, and we'll bring back the best we can on the deficit piece.
We can operate at a deficit for a little bit. It is not advisable, but we can do it in the short term.
We can still present a balanced budget, just knowing that there was a deficit, we need to carry over to plug the hole.
And we're going to carry over and plug this hole this year, correct?
With the budget deficit, yes, we have to.
I guess
We'd be
I'm sorry, I'm really
eating away at
confused.
the savings.
Yeah.
We'd be eating away at the general fund
So,
savings.
let's say I got paid $5, but I'm trying to buy something for $8. I had to use my allowance from last week to cover the $3 difference.
Right.
That's deficit spending.
Right.
So in 2019, we brought in X number, we spent X plus
Right.
190,000.
I have a question. So, not being on the finance committee and not seeing quarterly projections, are we close to truth in that 190,000 deficit for the year?
So we have had some revenues that weren't planned in 2019. The Bureau of Workers' Comp, they did their $1 billion give back again. So that was over $100,000 that went to the general fund. We weren't
Okay.
expecting that. We also had another $100,000 when we sold that property. That wasn't budgeted for. So we have unbudgeted revenues that came in, so that's going to help us. But we also had to increase our expenses. But I would say it's close. We'll probably exceed our budgeted revenues this year, but by a little
About the
bit,
same?
yeah.
Okay, so I mean, so the reason I'm asking this is because in my mind, we came into this year with a $190,000 deficit, and we plugged that hole with our carryover, but we're not gonna be plugging it much, if at all.
Well, we're still going to have a hole because we still have increased expenses. We had a lot of expenses too in the general fund that were planned as well.
So what kind of direction do you want? I mean, I don't know, what do you want to hear from us? What do you want to hear?
Give me a number you guys are comfortable with.
I
Or
already
if
did,
you're
I
comfortable.
said, I said, but I don't know what you guys, nobody else is saying it. Are you comfortable with, what are you comfortable with? Maintaining it, either doing your best, but not going over 250,000.
Well, so you guys, we have to remember though, that we have a 3% payroll increase?
2.5.
2.5%
Yeah.
payroll increase happening this year?
And the hospitalization costs are going up 2%, workers' comp costs go up. I mean, the expenses keep going up.
Yeah. So I mean, like, 250, inflation, $250,000 this year is $325,000 next year.
Correct, but if we're going to take 2020 to really work hard on avoiding that 2021 deficit, what are we willing to live with today to get this moving forward? That's the question on the table.
Or where we need to be to set ourselves up for that conversation in 2020.
Correct.
So I know Andy wants a specific number, and as a finance director, totally understand why he wants a specific number. But if council just wants to give me direction to continue to do the best that we can, I'm comfortable with that as well.
I vote for that.
Agreed.
Just knowing that we're not going to have the time to go through budget hearings twice because
Correct.
we're doing the implementation of the new accounting software and it's getting really time tight,
No,
so.
and speaking for myself, whatever Monica and you come to us with, I'm not gonna ask you to go back and do it, because I know it's your best effort.
Okay,
Is that your
Especially
statement?
knowing you guys are both kind of misers.
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
all right.
So I know that's your best effort, and you're, yeah.
As long as it's close to the 190,000.
So
I don't know that we can, I don't think we can specify that.
that's, we're looking at 365 right before we do anything.